Well, I think it's time to wrap this up, huh? So this is the closing keynotes. Most of you I've seen throughout the event, spent time with you in sessions, chatting, everything like that. So thank you for being at the Data Summit for the full 2 days here. Thank you for sticking around to closing keynote. That's my section. So I get to wrap this up, bring it home, be the bookend from kicking it off in the morning. But first, I had a couple of things I wanted to reflect on from just this Data Summit before I get into my presentation, which is going to be sharing a lot of the results or insights from our recent market study. But before that, I actually wanted to start off by saying thank you. So it really is thank you to, at first, the DBA team that's all here that runs this event, makes it possible. They're behind the scenes, the reg desk, they're moving around AV. Amazing job. So a big thank you to them, as well as our sponsors, all the vendors you saw out there. This doesn't happen without them. And I was really happy to see all the great sponsors we had. Great presentations from them as well. Really tough job, our moderators. I was one of them, but I know we have moderators in all the other tracks, and it's a job keeping the whole show moving and on schedule, and they volunteer to do that. So they're here just to be a part of this community. And then, of course, attendees, right? You guys are here. What I even like more about this is you guys are here, you're sharing, you're asking questions, you're contributing, and that's what really makes Data Summit different, in my opinion. I'm at a lot of events throughout the year, but this is one of my favorites because everybody who shows up contributes, shares. I get different perspectives. I mean, how many of us learned something new this event? Same, me included. So there's that. And with that, we have something new. Here's the other thing I find. How many of us had stuff that we always wondered about but got it validated here? We heard, this is a common thing. So since I'm at a lot of different events throughout the year, this past year or so, starting last year, the spring of this year, there is one common theme. And I kind of saw it here, not as bad, but I've seen it at some other events, which is basically what I'm calling AI anxiety. There is a lot of anxiety, right? I've already seen some of the peaks at other events where it's like, it's going to change everything, everybody's jobs are going to change, we don't know, and what is, anxiety comes from? It really comes from uncertainty about the future. But one of the things I find about this event and a few others that I go to, the big key in the room, the general mood and sense is, we'll figure it out. We'll figure this out together. And that's really the thing that says, hey, this is all, it's changing, it's fast moving, we're trying to keep up, we're sharing. But I believe the people who do get through this big transformation are the ones who are going to be at the front lines figuring it out and figuring it out together like this. So that's what attendees do. That's the sense at a lot of the events that I'm going to have in common. So with that, now that we transition, and I don't want to officially call this summit group therapy, but in a way, it's a little bit of group therapy. We're sharing. We know we're not alone. We're sharing what works, what doesn't work, and it helps us feel better when we leave. So with that, what I want to do is share my presentation, which is we just ran a market study, which we do about once a year. It's been on database or data architecture trends in the past couple of years. But this year, the main focus was really on AI readiness. So how often do we hear this term, AI readiness in enterprise data, or how ready are you, AI ready, right? There's AI first, AI ready, and we're all focused on that. So this survey that we developed and worked on with DBTA and Unisphere Research went into the market. We launched it in February of this year, so it's fresh. Because I do see some statistics that are, right, MIT says this many, 90% of, companies are stuck in pilots and things like that. Yeah, that was last year. I'm already knowing, talking to companies and events and people, that the needle's moving really quick. It's not quite that anymore. This year is already new and we're only at May. So this data captured a lot of interesting stuff. We're still analyzing it. Since you've attended, you will all get in your inbox shortly this month the full report, the full analysis. What I'm going to share today is some of the sneak peeks behind the scenes. I've been working on the data for the last several weeks. It was launched in February. I got the data kind of at the end of March. So we captured most of that in fielding. And then in April, I got to start to work on and hammer out some of this data. And some of the, let's say, contradictions I'm finding are really intriguing. But this is data. So we get to interpret that and kind of share our perspectives. So that's what I want to share with you as we wrap this up, kind of a couple of takeaways from data, from people, what respondents are saying. This here talks about, just so you know, this is what the survey outline looked like. We had sections, we had 6 of them that started with AI maturity and outcome questions. Agentic AI and orchestration, like how are you doing? What are you doing? What are the challenges? Things like that. AI enabling data infrastructure. What are you using, right? What tools, what technologies, what platforms? AI trust and governance. This is an area we knew was becoming more and more important as we move forward, is trust is going to be the key to AI, just as much as context. So we have a section on that. Outcomes, ROI, measurements. How are you measuring your success? What, is it meeting your expectations? You know, what are the different kinds of measures? What kind of numbers and experiences are you getting? And then finally, we went into the last section of what are your biggest challenges and what are your strategic needs to make this move forward? So this survey collected a lot of that data, and it's really the analysis that I'm going to share that kind of helps you gauge where you're at, your own maturity, your own journey, your own speed, but compared to kind of the industry overall. Like I said, it's March 226, recent, 2 months old, 259 qualified respondents. So as DBTA and Unisphere Research sent this out to lots of participants, not everybody qualifies to be in the survey. You've got to meet the right criteria. So there's a lot of filtering out. So what we're analyzing is the 259 respondents that met all the criteria and could answer all these questions. Total was about 31 questions. For those of you who get involved with survey designs, it's always about how short should I make it so I get good, quick answers, or how long should I do it and get really fully detailed. So the balance for me was around 25, 30 questions to ask. And this report, I will say, was sponsored by Quest, who's one of our sponsors here at the summit. And what they do is they say, this is valuable information. We want you to go off and do this independent research, do the analysis, share the results so that we can share it with our customers. So thank you to Quest, who's made this possible as well. So what I did is I picked from the current analysis we've done, what are kind of right now the top 3 insights that I'm seeing in this data. So, ready for the top 3? All right, so let's jump into number 1. So there was an area around AI readiness that showed some really interesting data. So one of the things we do is we have about 10 to 12 demographic information questions. So when I look at who succeeds and who doesn't succeed, who says they're ready, partially ready, then I can slice and dice this by how big is your company? What industry are you in? What are your budgets, right? All of these different factors, I can look and compare what those results look like. So when it came to AI readiness, here's what I can say. I can say AI readiness does not predict AI success, which is different than what the industry keeps telling us, right? So how's that possible? It's kind of counter, right? Because we have readiness. We want to prepare. We want to look at our environments, our data foundations. We want to measure our readiness because that's what we've been hearing for the last year. How do we be ready for adopting AI, implementing, and moving forward with that? So what I found was this is not correlating. So when we started to, what are some of the questions or the answers, numbers I came up with? Because the outcomes told a different story. People who self-assessed their readiness were saying that 74% of them rate themselves as mostly or fully AI ready. So if I add up those 2 categories. Yet, if 3/4 of them are saying they're AI ready, half of them have success that are less than 50%. That's a big mismatch. How is so much readiness not yielding a corresponding amount of success. So when we looked at the failures in that group that said, hey, we're not being successful with our AI initiatives, 77% of those said it was because of data issues. So, okay, so data is becoming the underlying issue here. So we trace it back to all the different facets and dimensions of data, managing data, and then we said, okay, but still, if we're talking about the issues that we say or why we were not successful is because of data, how can we say that we have AI readiness scoring at 74%? So confidence is high, but then delivery is not. That's what I was looking at. So spending 2 days with you guys, talking, discussing all of these kinds of things, saying, wow, why is this? So one of the first things I have to do, right, talking to my data therapists in this group, is really say, okay, where's this false confidence coming from? So hopefully this is legible on the chart. I still wanted to show it all, but we have the different dimensions here. And what we have ranked is the dark blue being mostly or fully ready, and then not ready or partially. And you can see data accessibility, 74%. Data quality and accuracy is at 72%. So this is another one where I'm like 72% of the people say they're mostly or fully ready with their data quality and accuracy. Yet what we hear in the news all the time, data quality is the number one issue why AI is failing. Well, let's think of it this way. This is how people are assessing their data quality, right? So we don't know if that's really what their data quality is, but this is what people think their data quality is. Data security. That's the third one there at 70%. And then the ones that I expected to be higher up on this list were semantic definitions, metadata, right? Trust scoring. I thought those were going to be up at the top. You know, for, hey, these are things where we're measuring readiness, so we know what that means for AI, so that should be higher up. And it was kind of mid-tier. And then we heard Sanjeev talking this morning about unstructured data, and I heard about the importance of that from other presenters throughout this, that's the key, that's the gold mine that we have to tackle. Their readiness there is the lowest score, 63% of their unstructured data. So, like I said, I'm sitting back, I'm looking at this data, I have to think, well, what's Joe, my data therapist, going to say about this, right? That's the voice in my head. What is Joe going to say? What's Joe? I'm going to do my Joe voice. Well, if data quality and lineage and governance disciplines were practiced for the last 30 years, this isn't new. You're not telling me something new. So why are these AI initiatives failing on exactly those dimensions, right? That's what you guys are thinking. That's what I was thinking. I'm like, we get this. We've been around. So one of the things that I kind of start to think about this and poke holes in this and look at this data, well, I'm like, well, maybe, and I heard it here. I heard it in other presentations that validated what I was coming in thinking with this, which was the data quality frameworks that we built and we measured were really built for monthly reporting, for data and analytics. It wasn't really reporting or based on what AI needs quality to be. It was based on what we needed data and analytics to be. It's the same with governance. Governance, audit trails, policies, compliance. Is that the same way we define governance when it comes to AI? No. We heard today, new thing. Focus on the outputs, right? Look at the outcomes. Do governance on the outputs. And that's because we're focused on the inputs when it comes to governance. So when we assess ourselves, we're thinking in terms of, hey, we have a program, right? We should be ready to go into this, but we're really not for AI. And it's the same with semantic layers. If you do the research, I think you'll find that the semantic layer term was, started in 2001, and I believe it was business objects, right? The universes. That's where the official term for semantic layer came up. 2001 was also the same year Howard Dresner coined the term business intelligence. So semantic layers back then were about business intelligence. It's not what we saw here talking about context, memory, learning. So here we have semantic layers that are designed for what AI agents need. I like to simply think that if what we got away with, right? If you look at metadata, if you look at governance, you look at semantic layers, we always got away with that because of the price of speed for data analytics, BI, things like that. But we relied on, our crutch was the knowledge in every one of our users' head. They knew the difference when they saw this, that this data doesn't look right. The power users would guide other teams into, here's the proper way to do this. They weren't fully relying on the semantic layers. They were useful enough, but AI comes in cold and looks at this and says, here's the answer. And you're like, whoa, there's nobody there to stop that, or to check that, or check the outputs. Governance, semantic layers, quality for AI are different. So what this means when I'm looking at this is I start to say, maybe there's a better way we should be redefining AI readiness. Maybe it's a nebulous term, right? I said AI ready. Maybe there's half a dozen or more different definitions popping up in people's minds when I say that. So here, what I did was I said, let's take a look at the orange dots, which are 50% higher or higher success rates with their AI, and less than 50% success rates. So what separates the successful ones from the unsuccessful, or less than 50% successful ones? And you can see the rankings change. The biggest gap between those two is actually in data security. We think we have security, but security at the AI level is different. It's actually scary. The next one, unstructured data. We kind of expected that because that's kind of the whole big data space, and really none of us did that much big data. We just used a different platform to do the same thing we've always done with enterprise data. That was big data. That's what I saw. So here, the bigger gap at 17 points is around unstructured data. Semantic definitions, beyond just here's the definition of this metric. No, what's the context? When should I use this? When should I not use this? When people mention this fact, these are the other synonyms for that term. All of that semantic context is missing, so that one came in at number 3. Trust scoring, we've heard a lot about trust scoring. And trust scoring, trust indexes, all of that comes up in the what is your weights when it comes to calculating trust? How do you trust that this data is usable to make business decisions? How do we trust the data so that we can say, AI, it's okay to use this data? And then quality, accessibility, metadata, now those drop down to what we thought were the top priorities within being successful and being AI ready. Turns out there's half a dozen other primary dimensions that we need to focus more on when we redefine what AI readiness means. So that was kind of my first takeaway, which is, AI readiness is not a predictor for AI success. Well, okay, I will rephrase that. The current definition of AI readiness is probably too fuzzy. We probably need to come up with a newer definition, shake off the old data BI kind of mindset when it comes to readiness, and think about how AI needs to, the new user and how it needs to consume data in order to do its job to reason, analyze, and take action. That was kind of the first takeaway. And yeah, here at the event, talking to a lot of people, I'm hearing that this sounds about right. And the data, I'm looking at the data trying to figure this out. So this is, when we're doing our research side, this is kind of the process that we go through. So did we almost hear about being trapped in AI pilots versus AI production about every other session? I heard and it's all completely valid. I heard about the AI traps. I heard about AI purgatory. I heard about, being stuck in AI. Kind of proof of concept mode. So from this data, what I'll say is that AI pilots should not become production. So, and that's a good thing. So when I'm looking through this data, one of the things I come up with, if you're working on your AI pilots, there is a good chance that you should stop thinking that's going to become production. because the ones who do it and get into the production approach it differently. So what are organizations in production have that the pilot organizations don't? When I look at the numbers and look at the gaps between successful and partially or not successful, committed budget. If you get a small budget to go play around and tinker, that's what you're going to do. So one common theme was the biggest gap at 31 points was there was a committed budget greater than 100K. Number two, this was something I thought was going to be in the top 3, fully traceable AI model outputs. We talked about if you want to do this, you've got to look at the inputs, you've got to look at the outputs of this. Can I trace back, even in Sanjeev's keynote, how do we trace back through the decision process that agent went through? And that traceability is what we need to verify in order to improve it, correct it, fix the memory, fix the context, to get it to a level that we can rely on. Ready semantic definition. So I grouped semantic definition, security, and quality because they were all about the same spread at 25 points. So for those that are successful, the production, 85% versus 60% in the pilot phase, they are ready in that stage. So once again, that's the new version of semantics, security, and quality. And then finally, automated AI readiness assessment. How many of us have an automated version of that versus we check our data manually or we run a report and we can say that we are ready versus one that's running on a schedule or running continuously saying that this data is ready for AI consumption? Because throughout a day, maybe there's gaps, maybe there's quality issues, maybe new data coming in shouldn't be used as part of the decision making that's going on there. So do you have automated data or AI readiness? This is the other one I thought was interesting. So operational governance or data governance approach. What's interesting here is that when you look a little deeper into the data, you find that a little governance is better than none. So this is a operational, hey, this is the governance we need to take this into production. Let's not have to do governance for everything, right? Governance with a capital G, let's put it that way. This is about this agent being able to do its workflow within this context. Do we have the proper governance there? Security, traceability, controls, monitoring. That's the governance you need, even within a pilot or a POC, to take that into production. So little governance, operational governance, is enough to get you going into taking that POC into production. Now what's interesting is the bottom note there, that 5 of these operational foundations are foundational things. They're strategic foundational things that you invest in. They're programs. They're not shiny objects. They're not a new tool you just plug in and get a quick win. So I know we have vendors, we have great tools. They're there to facilitate a great process, a great culture, a great mindset for making these foundational things a part of your culture. All right, my therapist is now saying, hey, aren't these just characteristics of organizations that are further along, more mature in governance, and isn't that just a correlation, not really a prescription? So yeah, I can put on my data scientist hat and say, not all correlations are causation, right? But the way I look at it is pilots, and what I've seen in a lot of the AI pilots, are checking if the technology works. It's not operationalizing this process into the business operations. So pilots figure out if the AI technology you're selecting works. Production requires AI to work reliably. That's the difference here. So experimental AI budgets, yeah, you could probably do a POC, play with some tech short term. Is it enough to do the investment that will get you into reliable production? A governance framework, right? Something in development is probably, is not the same as the one that's partially operational. That'll get you into production, at least on that use case. A partially traceable AI model is not one that's fully replaceable. It's kind of you trust it or you don't, right? I trust it sometimes. Which sometimes are you trusting it and not trusting it, right? So where's the traceability here? Where can you go back and check that this is what's going on? I have confidence that we're monitoring this. We're tracking the outputs. We can say what's going on. It's not to say it's going to be perfect. This is probabilistic, right? It's to say that I know how to make adjustments to this and continuously improve it. So it does say, get it into production, work it, introduce it carefully, have your full governance controls. I mean, zero skipping on security, governance, compliance, all of that kind of stuff. Zero chances with that. But with that, you're going to learn to improve your process, improve your controls, improve your governance. So if you stand back and wait for perfect governance to take that there, you won't get there. So here's the way that I kind of position this. I talk about pilots are experimenting, production is operationalizing this. Two different mindsets and one operational gate between them. So if I looked at those things that we saw in the first slide, committed budget, traceable outputs, multidimensional readiness, I kind of grouped those three, automated assessment and operational governance, what we have is that, and I heard this once or twice throughout the summit while I was here, and I kind of smiled to myself and my therapist in my head. And what we said was, some other people see the same thing. When you go into a pilot with the mindset that this is going into production, if you budget and build it and plan for production, then you get out of the experiment POC trap. So I think the trap is really when you go into POC mode, you check out the technology, does this work? But you didn't go in with a mindset of how are we going to operationalize this? That's the difference. So it's coming in with the, and admit it up front. We're playing and experimenting, that's fine. Then it's not a pilot that you plan to take into production. If you plan to take this into production, if that's the expectation you set with your executives and your stakeholders, and then take that mindset from the beginning and work it all the way through. That's the difference between the successful ones and the ones that are partially successful. Okay, number 3. So I said, let's do just these 3 kind of insights. We've got about half a dozen right now that I have to pick my favorites from. But what would be the third kind of most meaningful one for our keynote today? So I said, well, we've talked about the fact that AI readiness needs to be kind of rethought or redefined. We've talked about this pilot trap. Well, that means go in with the right mindset. So what about the agentic AI architecture itself? I was like, gosh, I'm talking about all this foundational program. I'm a techie, so why aren't we talking about the cool stuff? So a data foundation is not enough for successful AI. Wow, that goes against everything I've been hearing in the industry so far. We're saying you have to have a data foundation first. You have to have your AI readiness first. Well, why isn't a data foundation enough to be successful then? So lots of data here, but what I did is I took that list, and these points are the spreads between successful AI implementations and partially less than 50%. So I said, okay, I want to look at the spread. And here's what I got. These, I think it looks like 14 different items. But when I looked at them and started to group them, I said, well, some of these are foundational. Data security, semantic definitions, data freshness and latency, unstructured data, knowledge graph platforms, right? 25 to 15% spread there. That's reasonable. That's significant. Those are related to the foundation. But when I looked at the other ones that were kind of differentiators between the more successful and less successful, full model traceability, that's at 26%, but that's not a data foundation thing really, right? Automate your data trust score. And I'm pulling kind of these gaps across all of those 31 different questions, trying to correlate what are the successful ones doing that's different than the ones that are struggling. Data quality for AI, that's a gap at 19. Trust scoring, readiness, metadata, and lineage. And so what I did is I pulled those out and said they're not really data foundation the way we think about data and analytics and what are kind of, like we said, we've been doing for decades. That's not new. This is the stuff that used to be between us and the consumers, us and the end users running reports. And that trust, that's because I trust Joe that he knows the data when he sees it, right? Or I trust Julie to say, this doesn't look right. She does that for me. So when we do that, the difference is now I've got to go to an AI system, and how do I trust it? So all of those factors are trust factors. So now we have to think about, okay, we've got our data foundation, quality, all of this stuff, but there's a secondary group that we really need to focus on if we want to be successful with AI, which is how are we going to build trust in the AI process? I think the third category, because we were at the, you can see it was dropping down. If the data foundation was 15 to 25, trust-oriented was ranged from 12 to 26 spreads. Well, down at the bottom part of that list, the 9 to 15 points were actually related to the AI architecture itself. So here we're saying, oh, we need real-time. We need fully autonomous agents. We need multi-agent systems or agent orchestration. Yeah, those things are important, but they're not as important as your foundation and your trust. So that's where we need to focus. So, and of course, I put on the bottom here, none of this matters if you don't have committed budget with the mindset to take this into production. So a lot of that is the, hey, there are some other table stakes which are, we're serious about this. We're moving past, I think I heard somebody talking about the different generations of, 22, 23, right? We had, the agent was, I think, 24. This year is all about agentic architectures. And I'm always like, well, that's the leading edge, and we're always about one step behind it. So agentic architectures are great. That's where we want to go to, right? That's kind of skating to the puck thing. But we've got to shore up what we already have. So once again, I have to think about this because I'm a techie. I like researching and working on MCP, multiple context protocol. That's a server, and that's a protocol in itself. RAG, retrieval augmented generation, stronger governance and compliance, right? That's what the industry is doing. I mean, we've seen presentations for 2 days talking about you need RAG here, you need context engineering here, I have an MCP box here. Some of us, what does that mean, right? So successful agentic AI is not being built on these which are quick fixes. I think a lot of these are, they're products. They're sold and positioned as quick fixes, shiny objects. They work great. I think MCP is one of my great favorite examples of the industry needed a standard. I remember 2 years working on this and saying, how are agents talking to each other? There's no integration. You can't move beyond the chat. So what are we doing? And then Anthropic came up with the NCP spec, and everybody started adopting that. And that went from, here's an industry spec that we're going to give to open standards. And within 6 months and 12 months, everybody had one. That's incredible adoption for here's the spec we think. So personally, what I hear at companies that are implementing MCPs, there's we know there are security concerns. Our top barrier to implementing agentic AI. And that's simply that this was a protocol that filled the gap everybody needed, but now trying to scale that, scaling MCP is becoming more of a security issue, right? So now we're taking a step back. So it's not about that. I spent the last couple of years also working on the RAG architectures, right? On vector databases. So there was semantics, there was access, metric stores, vector databases for similarity, graphs, knowledge graphs, ontologies for relationships, so we could understand better context. And now we've already moved on to, we need full knowledge graphs or context graphs that really help AI make better decisions. So that industry itself has moved on. I don't want to say RAG is last year, but it's evolved to what does RAG mean. So it's not a real, MCP, what's the term we're hearing? It is the USB-C of AI agents. You can take any one of your agents, you can plug it into any one of your applications, and it's a universal port that anything can take action in all your systems for you. Great concept, but we have to make sure that's secure. So when we're looking at this, right, the new protocols, MCP, security and controls concerns, so make sure you dial that down. RAG pipelines aim to improve context. This is one of my favorite kind of thoughts that I had with this that I had to write down with. They improve the context, because I've been promoting RAG for a couple of years now, and I do see the value, and I understand context engineering. We will continuously get better for that. But even if you have good context, it's no substitute for bad data quality. If you don't have good data quality underneath your context, it doesn't matter, right? Just because you understand or AI understands how your business is supposed to make decisions, if your data quality is not there, it still can't do it. So that's why the data foundation is there still. Governance, compliance, documents, trust, operational signals, and scoring demonstrates it. So I think we're seeing an evolution of governance. There's a lot of AI governance frameworks. I saw a lot of discussions around, is it data governance? Is it data and AI governance? Are they separate? Is it outcome? So I'm rethinking a lot of the things I heard here at the Data Summit. But that's a good thing, because once again, group therapy. You're not alone. We're all trying to figure this out, right? So when I'm looking at this, I'll take a position that's saying, yeah, governance is going to be about monitoring. It's going to be about looking at improvements, doing the measurements. How good did we get the context in? How good was our retrieval window and what we sent to the LLMs? How good was the answers coming out of that? We call that the harness, and there are companies specializing in that harness. So it's kind of the new agentic ops, if you will, similar to what we went through with machine learning and ML ops. So this is how I was thinking, okay, let's drill into this and talk about AI architectures, but the shiny objects, my favorite toys to plug in and play with and make happen, what happened in POCs and experiments are not what takes things to production as well. So I call this check your blind spot. So when we look at this, AI readiness means trust in your data foundation and your AI architecture. The top 7 gaps, right? Successful to struggling agentic AI organizations. The top one at separation, the biggest gap there, 26 points, full AI model traceability. And we heard a lot about that. The importance of traceability to know, how did your agent come to that decision? How did it, before it took action, right? This is the whole human in the loop. I learned this last year. That was my new acronym of the year, HITL, right? So I was in a conference, I was like, well, that's so HITL. I'm like, okay, what's that one? Human in the loop, which means we are the gatekeepers. So we have this scale that it's not new, this scale that we've done research on for many, many years ago that said, yeah, there are things that only humans can do. There are things that are fully automated and autonomous that machines can just completely do. Most of our stuff was rules-based, but when you get probabilistic, you just get your confidence up and let it automate. Then there's this section here that is, here are humans that are augmented with support, AI support, give me more information. That's co-pilots, right? And then we're going to say, okay, now let's flip the switch. The AI agents do the work, but we're the gatekeepers. We make the final decision of go or no go. We're not out of the loop. That's human in the loop. So that's the distinction for me. Are you using co-pilots where it's pulling and doing a lot of work for you? That's great. We have to move to the point where it's doing all of the work and you're just the decision maker. And if you want to trust it, that's your full AI traceability. That's your context engineering. How did it come up with this answer? How can I trust it? Data security is always on the short list. Most companies I'm talking to are concerned, right? If we're going to use public LLMs, if we're going to talk to other systems, there are bad actors out there. There are SQL injections. There are, prompt injections. There are a lot of things and ways people are doing bad things. So we want to make sure we're as prepared as we can for that. So be thorough when it comes to security. The third gap here at 19 points, semantic definitions. This was the knowledge in all of your business users' heads, in your power users and data analysts and business analysts' heads. I always loved the self-service data movement we had for a while because I loved working with all the analysts because I'd show them a whole page of data and they're like, that doesn't look right. They just knew it when they saw it. So how do we get AI to be able to do that? Because me on the data engineering side or on the data architecture side will look at this and go, look, I got 10,000 rows. But did I get the right 10,000 rows? Right? When somebody who looks at it and knows what they're looking, how do we get that knowledge into the semantic layer? That's the hard work. And that's not just this data is null. This one is outside of a range. The distribution doesn't look wrong or doesn't look right. It's that pattern of studying it and knowing that that just doesn't fit. That's not the way it should be. How do we get AI to the point of being as good as your best power users in the business that are connecting and writing SQL? So one of the things for me when I'm looking at all of this is I'm like, it's a familiar model to me. We had this in the data warehousing BI days, and I worked with a lot of companies at this point that said, okay, we have a system or no warehouse, and you know what? I would go to my colleague over here, and that person could always just run queries and get me the data I needed every week, and I trust that person, and I can get my job. That was when we built the first data warehouses. I struggled with, how do you stop calling that person to double check the answers coming out of the warehouse? That is the transference of trust from individuals, individual accountability, personal relationships, to a data warehouse. Now we're taking that there, it's like, oh, we have this data, we have governance, we have these things, trust the data, make decisions on this. Now we're saying, how do we trust AI to make decisions on what we have in the database? And do we have the right context? So the context is becoming the competitive moat for most companies, because every competitor in your space has access to the same LLMs, the same MCPs, the same vector databases. What they don't have is that institutional knowledge that you've been able to capture and put into your context semantic layer that makes you unique and makes you competitive. That's what they can't replicate. But all the other technology, I mean, the vendors are happily going to sell it to all of them, right? So then we fall into data quality, unstructured, and then automated data trust scoring. It just kind of drops down. So check your blind spot to me was like, question what you think is going to be, these are the things that separate us from being successful. There are things that we have from a data BI mindset that we're bringing over. And I've heard this here multiple times, that having an AI mindset is different. And we're just learning it. So, you know, it's not about modifying what you have. It's almost about starting over and rethinking with AI first, and how are we going to develop trust, and how are we going to rely on this? That's going to be the key when it comes to implementing AI. So, to wrap this up, my focus on this pass through all the survey data was, what does successful AI do differently? Right? I can slice and dice by a lot of parameters here. I focused on that one because I was coming in thinking trust, thinking pilots, and what is stopping people from getting their first successes? Well, I think one that kind of surprised me was, I have a hypothesis now that readiness, the way we've defined it today, is not correctly or correlating to success. So we have to think about, and we showed there are different parameters that matter to AI than that matter to data consumers or BI consumers. Plan and budget with a production mindset at the beginning. So some of us are always going into the pilot saying, let's do a pilot that'll prove that. And then you can say, yeah, we proved it worked. It's technology. You have to think bigger. You have to think beyond that and say, let's think about how we're going to take this into production. What does it take to operationalize this so that we can rely on it? That's the second mindset. And usually that's going to be around budget, but it's also operational thinking. And then AI is built on a data foundation plus a trust foundation. And I think they're separate, right? I think our trust was from those users. Our trust was in the semantic layer of BI, and now we have to figure out how are we going to transfer our trust into the agents to make decisions, right? Directors, managers, analysts, they look at the data, they know the data, we trust them to make good decisions. If we're going to move that to the agentic world, free up those people to do other things or more things, then we have to figure out how we're going to trust and rely on that. So we have to think about data foundation work. That's great. You can't have context without a data foundation, but formalize what it means to have trust. I've been talking to different vendors. It's an equation. We take all of these different things, we give weights. Maybe there's certain indicators, maybe it's a trust index, right? I think KPIs, we had a customer satisfaction index of 4.5. What does that mean? On a scale of 5 or 10, right? So what are these calculations? How are you going to measure trust, and how are you going to improve and monitor your trust scoring along with your data foundation equally? So with that, I'm going to let you guys go. Thank you again for another great data summit. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I hope you did too. And I hope you guys have some fun stuff to decompress tomorrow, but next Monday, we're back at it. So thank you again, and have safe travels.